in the newsletter. AABC, same thing, so that's the 1st or 5th of May down at Hobart. That'll be a really unique experience because you'll have people like Jared who will be presenting some pretty amazing Tasmanian natives. On top of with the AABC as well, we usually donate prizes as a club, so where's Brian? So Brian, I think is going to be giving a couple of his pots to the show. That's great. If anyone has any pots or things that can be travelled, not trees, maybe have a chat with Brian, assume it's not too big, because we don't want him lugging around heaps of things, but we usually give something to AABC just to, as like a random prize, essentially. So please give that some consideration. RAS show, so that's more in line with our club. Sorry, I know I'm rattling, there's lots of events coming up. That's on the 8th and 9th of April, so that's a Wednesday, Thursday. We have volunteers for the whole duration now, but if you would like to volunteer, the more the merrier. So if you do want to volunteer for either of those days, it's usually, there's 2 time slots you can go on and you get a free ticket to the show. Please talk to Chris if you're interested. On top of that, the RAS show, we also need some trees to have on the stand, as just on our display stand. If you've got some trees you're willing to give to Chris before then, to have looked after and show off the club, please make a note, and you'll need to drop them off at his house in the West. Please consider that, because it would be really, really helpful for everyone involved. Competition, also in the newsletter, the 12-month competition. If you've got a tree, please send an email to the club with your entrance. I will close it by the end of this month, because I think I've dragged it out long enough. We have about 7 entrants at the moment. I'd like to get that closer to 10 if we can, so please check that out. You've got all right. Last one from me. In April, we're going to be doing a meeting just on natives, and what we thought would be interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, is that you would bring along unique species of natives or a native plant and come and talk about the tree, so in front of everyone. And it can be, you can ask for critiques, you can just come up and say, hey, this is this really weird niche plant that only grows in this tableland in southern New South Wales. You've probably never seen it, come have a look. Okay? We would love that sort of stuff. So we'll give some more details in the newsletter next month, but maybe just get that cemented in your brain that we're going to get people to present their species. All right. Tonight, perfect pairings. So perfect trees and the perfect pots. I think this was inspired by Ben, who finally found the pot he wanted for a tree that he has, and he figured that they themed the whole night on it. So we will do a critique later, but first and foremost, we've got former member of the club, John, here tonight, who is going to give a presentation on tool sharpening and everything associated with that. If you'd like to take the stage, then can we all welcome?
Thanks, Ollie. Some places are familiar, some aren't. I'm a long-standing member of the club rather than an old member of the club. And I had a fire in my shed in my backyard about 6 years ago, and I lost 50 plus bonsai trees that come to me from the shed. And I also lost my watering system, so I lost a great number of trees through that little exercise. But I've still got about 30 odd, but I've taken up other interests, and my major interest in that area is wood carving and that's dead trees rather than live ones. So what I'd like to talk about, and this goes back to the old give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day, teach him to fish and he'll eat for a lifetime. So rather than me come here and sharpen tools, I'm going to do some theory on what to do with your bonsai tools, and hopefully with a bit of practice, and I know many of you do it anyway, you won't make too many drastic mistakes. So I'll start with something very simple. There's scissors, and people don't realise the theory behind scissors. Scissors actually rely on the two blades doing this. They cross over each other. And as the blades slide along each other, that's what does the cutting. And these are ones I use for root pruning. They're cheap as mud, and they demonstrate exactly. If I can close those, you can actually see air along the blade. And then as they're open, those two cutting surfaces actually cut as they slide up each other. And these normal scissors, as opposed to our bonsai scissors, have a very steep cutting edge. That's not sharp at all, because that's not the cutting edge. And that's just about at 90 degrees. It's a little bit less than that, but it's almost 90 degrees. And that's your normal house roughest gut scissors, which is why I use them for root pruning, because you get a little bit of sand in them or a bit of gravel, and they're easy to sharpen and it doesn't do them any harm. Whereas you start spending some money, these are exactly the same process, except the cutting edges don't have a second bevel, and that angle there runs all the way up to the cutting surface. But they still use that crossover cutting process. And that crossover cutting process is essential for it to cut. So what you don't do is sharpen the inside of the blade, because you'll stop those two blades from touching each other. And on these ones, you only sharpen that, what I'm saying is a dull edge, but the actual cutting edge is quite sharp. But what you're doing is sharpening that bit there, and not that. And equally with bonsai shears, snips, whatever, they all use the same process. You sharpen that bit there, and not where they contact each other. Now, as you sharpen, whatever method you use, and I'll talk about that later on, you may well get a burr on the area that you're not supposed to sharpen. Now, you get rid of that with a very fine sandpaper, and it's as simple as that. You don't need anything flash. These little diamond sharpeners, which you can get at Bunnings, they do a trick, and all you're doing is taking the burr off. Now, the bane of my life is sharpening these and branch cutters, the more oval ones, which I didn't bring tonight. Now, the reason for that is, there's two theories, is that on some of them, you'll notice that these two blades actually overlap, like a buck tooth. Now, what you're then doing is one side is cutting the underside. When they overlap, that side is going on the inside of that. Now, what you've got to sharpen with these is that bevel on the inside, which is counterintuitive. And all you're doing with the outside is keeping those two surfaces. In my case, I like them lined up, but other people like them just slightly over. You do your bark stripping, you use a knife. Anybody use a potato peeler?
I do.
Potato peelers are a wonderful thing, and that's again counterintuitive. The blade on the potato peeler, where it's suspended here and here, is that shape with the top cut off. And the more you use it, the more that comes down. You hardly ever have to sharpen a potato peeler, but they're excellent for removing bark for doing gins and saris. And then otherwise, I just use a carpenter's knife, and again, with these as opposed to scissors, you're sharpening both sides of the blade, and if you look up on the internet, that angle there will vary with what you're doing with it. With cutting timber and what we're doing, cutting bark and things, you want it quite sharp, 27, even sharper than that degrees. Whereas a Chinese cleaver, you've got quite a steep angle. It's not sharp as in that. And because it's such a steep angle, it'll take far more abuse. You hollow out your branch hollows. You use a chisel. Anyone use a chisel? Yeah. Again, you're only sharpening the outside of the chisel, and on the inside, you can see from here, but that's a mirror. That's mirror sharp. I clean that out on that, but you don't need a sophisticated sharpening wheel, and it's only the leather hone on that I'm using for taking the burr off. Anyone use one of these?
Yeah.
Cutting roots, yeah, cutting big branches. It's got two cutting edges. This side here is almost flat. All the work on this sort of a saw is done on this serrated side. And they're very difficult to sharpen. You just use a cornered file. Do it in 5 minutes.
You gotta do it on each separation.
Yeah, you just, however you damage them as whatever you're doing, you just go over that 1 or 2 strokes, and that'll bring it back to a razor sharp edge. You cut yourself on that, and it looks daggy and anything else, but that's sharp. Now, what sophisticated tools do you need to sharpen all these? What you don't need is one of these. What I'm using, as I mentioned before, for doing this sort of work, is I'm using this wheel here. They're just leather honing wheels, and I'm using very dear honing. That's for sharpening bumper bars on cars, for polishing bumper bars on cars. And it'll do a perfect job on any tool that you want to bring up to a mirror finish. Right. 180, 240, 500. You don't need anything more than that. You can sharpen anything with this there. Does anyone here not own a Dremel? Okay. You don't have to spend this sort of money. Because for sharpening tools, you don't need any power. All you need is the bit rotating at a reasonably high speed. I forget how many $100 that is. That's about 30. And that'll do the job perfectly well. Same collet, all of any of the heads and any of the tools will fit that. And cheap as chips.
What is it?
What is it? It's just a cheap Dremel.
Little rotating.
Well, it's actually a Dremel, but it's the low power.
You can keep your eye out, they haven't got battery box.
There you go, the voice of reason.
My brother's got one Zoom chair.
That sort of thing, the fine blades, will do just about anything you need to do with any of your tools. It'll take the inside, sharpen the inside of that. I'm about to cut myself. If ever I cut myself sharpening tools, that's what I cut myself on, because you're getting inside there, and what you've just done is sharpen the other side, which you touch with the top of your
So, sorry, what was that, the burr that you were using, the brush, or that you were saying?
That's just a fine cutting wheel. But any of your brushes, you can take any of your, if you've got sap build up, any fine surface rust, any of the fine brushes, I'll take that off. And any of these soft polishing wheels, once you get your polishing compound on them, they go dark, but they'll clean up anything and polish any of your tools to a razor sharp. Equally, these, again with the fine sandpaper on them, they'll clean up, they'll sharpen any tool that you've got. All right, you've been very quiet.
It's a bit hard to see which tool you're holding up from back here.
Chris.
Just one thing, if anyone's mucking around with Dremel, if you go down flat out, it'll be doing 20,000 RPM. So wear glasses. Because if those little things shatter, most contacts probably before. But if they shatter, they're doing 20,000 RPM.
Well, the one thing about what you're doing for sharpening your tools or keeping them sharp is you don't need 20,000 RPM. You dial them down to 6 or 8, and that's plenty for what you're doing. You're only taking, you're not on a grinding wheel. You're not taking off great bits of metal. All you're doing is keeping your edges clean.
Much more funny.
I made myself up a few the same pieces, 400, 600 paper.
Yeah.
So I got a whole thing of that. Fine, so
Yeah, any
that's really
double-sided sticky tape is all you need. You don't need anything sophisticated. You buy a roll of double-sided sticky tape in Aldi when you're on special, and that'll do you for 10 years, because you're only using 9 years now. And that holds it quite firmly enough for what you do.
The shop said this is what the status or just not is there a difference?
No, they work on stones. Yeah. Chris again.
With the branch cutters, you'll describe where one overlaps the other. The other theory is they come together neat.
Yeah, well that's my theory.
But there's a little quirk with that, and you know this better than me. Where they come together and you start grinding them, you'll end up with a gap, because there's a little pin on the handle that stops it at a certain point, because you don't want the things to actually hit each other. You want them to come up, and there should be an air gap between them so they don't blunt each other up. So once you've sharpened them and you've got that little gap, then you've got to go in and grind the pin to shut them up a little bit. Do you want to explain that just quickly? If they want to do it that sort of, in fact, you'd still have to grind that pin if they overlap it. But yeah, it's tricky little bit. Yeah, right.
What you've got, what Chris is talking about, is that pin there. And when it's closed, that stops them from moving any further. So as over the years, as you take, cut myself here, as you take metal off there and there, as you open the gap there, and we're talking minute amount of material. And again, something as simple as a file in there, one or two strokes with the file will be enough for those two edges to meet up.
The gap actually doesn't have to be all that large before when we cut it. It'll leave a couple of strands there and it won't part with it. So it's actually quite tricky to get right.
Yeah. Lee was probably at Illawarra the last time I was down there for the show down there, and I sharpened tools for 3 days for him. And the most complicated ones are doing them. Where that had been badly sharpened in the past, I go back to square one to cut them off quite blunt so that they match up, and then resharpen the inside so that you get a keen edge on it.
You don't bother with whetstones, obviously.
Well, I haven't used an oil stone. I probably own 10 of various grades, and I haven't used an oil stone for years, including all my wood carving chisels and my wood turning chisels. I do them all on the whetstone and with various grades of sandpaper on blocks, and then finish them off on the leather. So the world's moved on, I think, from the oil stones. And the other thing, the replacement for oil stones, if you go to Carbotech or any of those, everyone's using diamond stones. And they're cheaper and they're flat and they wear far better. And again, what I learned on the fishing trip probably 30 years ago, and these are people who are filleting fish at sea every day, sharpening knives virtually every day. They don't use oil, they use washing detergent. And any oil build-up, it lifts out, and you just wash it in water.
I think that was something you told us the last time we did this. So we've been doing it the whole time. It just makes our process easy. All it nice. When you finish up, you wash it.
Yeah.
And you go.
Okay.
John, from the point of view of sharpening and cutting, do you have any comments about stainless steel versus carbon steel?
I do, because, as I said, I'm a wood turner, and all of my chisels are high-speed steel chisels. I don't own a stainless steel chisel. But for bonsai work, where you're getting the sap build-up, you're cutting green, and all you're doing as far as sharpening is concerned is keeping an edge on it, stainless steel's fine. And as far, Chris mentioned what you do with a branch cutter, you're not, this is not a good example because it's not a branch cutter, but you're not doing that as you're cutting your branch off. You're doing that. And that's the technique. You think about what you do if you're cutting the branch. You're actually using a slicing motion rather than a stabbing motion. And last but not least, secateurs have a combination of both. Bypass secateurs do anyway. Annual secateurs, I've never owned a set. Because annual secateurs, blade comes down, cutting blade comes down in the middle of that and actually crushes it.
But that work. But that work.
Well, I've never owned one.
I'll try and figure out. I'll try and have it.
Yeah. Okay. Again, unlike scissors, the two blades aren't overlapping in doing this. There's a bypass action like a guillotine. And you sharpen this and this, not the inside. That there, and just about any set of secateurs I've ever owned are able to be pulled apart for that very reason. You pull them apart, you've got access to that blade, and you're sharpening that square, or very close to square. Whereas the actual cutting edge, you're sharpening that down the bevel, and not on the inside. On either of those two cutting edges. You need that very close to plane. They're doing that. You all use these? No? You when it gets blunt, you throw the blade away and blind you. Not true, you can sharpen them. I sharpen them on the leather strop, and you can get a razor edge back on the leather strop, and equally with your fine diamond you can get a sufficiently cutting edge that you'll cut yourself on the scalpel.
Oh yeah, I've got the scalpel I use to knock all this stuff. I was looking for replacement blades, so to get $5 or $9 on specialty office works. I was looking for some special stainless steel inserts on a big Chinese side. I could get $106.
Yeah, what are they made of?
They're the same.
Yeah.
No, they're the same way.
Because I get mine from Berkeley's Art Supply.
Yeah.
Cutting lines.
Yeah. No, I've got a really good one with these ones. I reckon I can buy 100.
So that little diamond, is that probably the most useful thing to do, just to sharpen it?
Yeah. That just sits in my bonsai kit with all the toothbrushes and all the other stuff that's in it.
They're a lot cheaper than a bloody good whetstone.
Oh, yeah.
Whetstones were $200.
This is, it's just a diamond sharpening stone, and they come in various grades. This is super fine, but they get coarser and coarser, and that brand is Easy Lap, but I'm sure they're in Bunnings and wherever else. If not, Carpentech will have them all.
And you just do the 3 grades for that, like 600, 120, same story?
Well, again, any of those, I'm using, any of the coarser stuff, I'm using sandpaper.
Okay.
That diamond colour is a lot finer than the sandpaper.
Oh, we're talking 1400 or so, yeah. Could even be finer than that. But if you've done something up to 500 or 600 on sandpaper, you're talking minor percentages after that. Yes, you'll get it sharper, and then there's another theory, which we can discuss that tonight. Because you're cutting green timber, there's fibres in it. How sharp do you want it to cut a fibre? You almost want it a tiny, tiny bit rough on the final edge. And I mean tiny bit, we're talking. You know? What you've got after a 600 sandpaper. If you put it under a microscope, yes, it'll have little bumps on the edge. You know? You put it up to 12, 15, 2000, then you're getting a mirror finish, but is that what you actually want? The answer's no.
Just want to make sure I've got this right. You're saying any of the surfaces that are rubbing against each other, you're not touching that surface, but touching the bevel surface on top?
Yes, on every single one of those tools.
Yeah, so we're now touching this one?
Work
or
out.
are we touching this
Work out what they're doing to cut. And as soon as you start cutting the inside surface, you've taken that, what's actually doing the cutting away. You've got two blunt things rubbing up against each other rather than the two sharp cutting edges.
Just take off the edge at the top so that it may.
And particularly for our tools, for bonsai tools, as opposed to others, that's got a secondary bevel on it. So that's been sharpened down, this design of it, not by me. That's sharpened down so far on that edge, and then right on the very edge, on the very cutting edge, it's got a secondary bevel. And that was an old theory before we got water stones with sharpening chisels. You do the same thing. You do the main edge, main cutting edge down at whatever, and then put a tiny, tiny steeper bevel on the actual cutting edge. But I don't.
It's changed that.
Yeah, but I mean, you look in the old in the old carpentry books, they all talk about the second edge.
Yeah, but that, the joy of that is that when you blunt that edge, it's only a tiny little edge to cut sharp. Whereas you have to sharpen the whole slope of the other thing.
Yeah, but with the water wheel and all your jigs, you just put the chisel back in and you recreate that edge every time. What? Put it in your jig.
Yeah.
So what you really saying is if it's flat, you don't touch it.
Well,
If the blade, like if you've got something like that, you don't touch that side.
yeah, yeah.
That's pretty.
And that's the same for every tool here on the table.
Yeah. And got this, like,
Yeah. The other thing about Japanese knives and some Japanese saws often have virtually a chisel edge. They're flat on one side, which is probably what you're talking about. They're flat on one side, and for sushi knives, flat on one side and only have a bevel on one side. And equally, Japanese saws for cutting off protruding timbers after you've done a joint. Again, they've only got a cutting edge on one side.
It's the same for budding knives and grafting knives.
Yeah. Anybody? Any other questions? All right.
Well, so it's a quick one, not so much related to sharpening. We touched on it before that you do a lot of wood carving. Would you use those Dremels for your wood carving or you do something else? I've seen people talk about when they're doing carving into
I'll tell you a little story. Jody McKay, who was the former member for Strathfield, who got knocked over by Chris Minns, who wouldn't accept that she was democratically elected by the members. But her husband Steve worked with me in both the Lands Department and the Department of Planning. And they bought a property up out of Goldmine. And we were at a function and Steve was whinging that going up and down hills, he was growing one leg shorter than the other by walking around his property. And what he needed was a walking stick. And I says, all right, I'll make like a staff. And I says, all right, I'll make you a staff. So I carved him a Gandalf grey staff, which he loved, and all the roots and the null top, I did that with a Dremel. And then my son, being a smart ass, said, oh, that's good, Dad. Gandalf the Grey's easy, can you do Gandalf the White? And Gandalf the White took me about 3 months, and that was using scalpels and dentist drills. But I did it, I've got a photo of it on my phone. So, yes is the answer, that I use Dremel in a wood carving. And for the heavy stuff, I also use Arbortech. And I don't know if you know anything about that machine, but it's probably the most dangerous tool I've got in the shed, far more dangerous than a chainsaw. And it is, for want of a better word, it's chainsaw on the disc, chainsaw blade on the disc, which you put on an angle grind. And as Chris was talking before, you're doing 20,000 RPM, it's very unforgiving. Forget about on flesh, I'm talking about on timber. Anybody else? Any other questions? Anything at all?
With that chainsaw disc, how much do you know? You obviously know how to use your chainsaw. What's the kickback zone on one of those?
No, well,
disc
what
pins?
it is, it's a Look, a disc that fits on the angle grinder.
It has a chainsaw chain.
And if you think of a chainsaw tooth,
Yeah.
which is the curved tooth with a guide on it,
Yeah.
that's the outside of the
Yeah.
Arctic blade.
And what's the risk with kickback? And where do you hold it to?
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what he's saying is that if you slip, you just cut the dirty gravity down.
Yeah.
Whatever you're trying to work
Yeah.
on.
I mean, you're behind it, you've got double blade and you've got a guard.
Yeah.
A really big
Right?
gouge.
Apart from doing something simple like dropping it on your leg, you're not going to hurt yourself with it,
Okay.
but you'll do major damage to whatever you're trying to carve with it.
Yeah.
I find a flat disc is so much. And more fun. So,
All right. Anybody else? Okay. Thanks for the
Put our
night.
hands together. So Chris is going to give a demonstration, discussion about presenting trees at the RAS coming up. How many people how many people are putting trees in the show this year? 1, 2, 3. Did you end up doing something? Just a tough one. It's pretty usual candidates. I think we should probably, I think we said it last year as well, we should probably be getting in our minds that as a club we probably need 5 to 10 members minimum putting in trees each year. So if you want to think about it for next year, maybe put it we'll make sure we have a fairly healthy turnout for 2027 RAS. God, you can take a kite or cut off
Yeah,
whatever.
I'll talk about, I was just talking about the RAS and talking to Lee reminded me of some years ago, and Sue's been dead for 8 years, so it might have been 10 or 12 years ago we were at the RAS. And Sue had a demonstration of a fig from a tree outside the pavilion, and then a 1-year-old seedling, and then a 2, and then a 5, and then the last tree was, from memory, I think 43 years old. And a young fella come up and said, "Could I grow one of them?" And Sue said, "Yes, you can, but I can't."
Yes, very good. Do you want to get an example? Do you want to do critique upwards as well? No. You doing a critique as well? Turn it on. Anyone put their hand up for critique tonight? John, Brian, anyone? I got my come on, plenty of names. John, you want to do the critique tonight?
I couldn't better Lee. I think Lee should do it again.
It's alright. Someone's got to be second.
We don't know that I've actually done this before. Not that long. Last year. I don't know why I'm doing it again.
You
But
haven't done it this year.
what I'll concentrate on is that, like, the thing's on in 4 weeks. So if you haven't got your trees up and going on some of the things, well, you're dead, mate. So just think of what happens between now and benching time of the show. We'll go back to the to how you're going to judge. I didn't realise it at the time, but there were the judging criteria put on a plaque a number of years ago at the show. And our aesthetic quality is 25, the trunk is 15, branches 25, foliage 15, roots 10, soil 5, and the pot 5. Now, by coincidence, not really, that's exactly how the chorus shows. You go back to the judging criteria in Chorus book, in to the mark. So that's sort of how you're going to be judged. You also, when the judging happens, it's going to be comparative. So maybe the best on trunk or whatever will get it 5 or 25 marks or something, but then the others are compared to that. So you can't have everyone with 25 marks because they're the best and they're not so best. So the judges should be going around and looking at all the trees, getting the overall picture and then doing the judging from there. Obviously you would have started your preparations months ago. What I'd suggest, if you're going to put a tree in, you have a backup, because if some bug gets in it or gets burned or whatever, you either leave a gap on the bench or you have a backup. My backups are just another tree I'd like to stick in there. It doesn't matter if your tree gets disqualified. You know, you put your big tree in an under 400 category and they go, that's disqualified, fine. It sits on the bench and people can have a look at it. But have a backup. It's also, if you don't want to be disqualified, it has to meet class requirements. It's no use putting a tree this big in a 400 class, because it will be disqualified straight off. So if you fair income, make sure, and they will check on the height. And 410 is not 400, I can assure you. Okay, the aesthetic quality is the summation of the tree overall. You know, what it looks like, how it impresses, the whole package. And does it say something to you? It's got aesthetic quality, it's got artistic quality, regardless of what style it is. So that's your big marks. So make sure it looks good. Get all the other details, and all the others are little bits that add up to the aesthetic. But make sure it sort of looks balanced, looks really spiffy, and it's the whole lot. They'll be judged on from there to there. So you stand and everything, they're all got to be coordinated. You could have a brilliant stand, but on the wrong tree. So you might get good marks for stand, but it's on the wrong tree. Okay, the trunk. Won't say too much about trunks because at this stage you're not going to do anything on the trunk. You know, it's there or it ain't there. Just have it clean. Make sure it hasn't got any marks on it, little grubby things growing out of it, bugs running over it, that sort of stuff. But the trunk is, you know, you've been doing that for 10 years to get the trunk right, so you're not going to change anything now. The branches, you still have a few options. You know, it's a bit, some of these probably should be down a little bit more. At this stage, they're probably not going to stay down unless you wire them. There seems to be a bit of controversy on whether you can wire them down and leave the wire on. Some people, judges don't see that as being a problem. If it was on the trunk, it would be a problem. But on a branch, not necessarily. I tend to think that's not the way. But if you can get away with it, if you're going to start wiring stuff down, unless it's a really pliable tree, it's not going to simply take a wire off in there and go, oh, let's go back on here. So, if you haven't got it, but that doesn't mean that you can't trim it and make sure there's no growth under the branch and all that sort of stuff. So again, the aesthetics of it. It would be a bit dramatic at this stage to start cutting branches off. You can't put branches on, but if it really looks bad, that's a bar branch or something like that, well maybe it goes. But it's an awful late decision to start cutting off branches now, because they're not going to repair. The foliage, obviously you can do that. This time of year is a real bugger, because particularly something like a fig, they're all starting to shoot. You've got them back to where you want them, they're looking good. And then we have this weather that we've had, sun, big rain, they all go whoosh, and they start pushing out in directions you don't want. So you can start trimming your, look at trimming your, you've still got, see, you don't know what the weather's going to be like. You've still got a little bit of time to maybe get some little shoots come back, but you're really cutting fine. There's not going to be a lot happening. It's going to get, the days are getting shorter, at 6 o'clock it's dark now. And it's going to start getting cooler. So, particularly for people who've got deciduous trees, getting a bit close on whether you want to muck around with the foliage too much. The roots, again, make sure they're clean, make sure if you want to expose them, they're exposed. If you don't want them exposed, hide them. Removing roots, you know, cross roots, letting you cut that off without a wing. I quite like that sort of stuff. But we could do that now. The soil, you can do something with the soil. It's actually pretty important to make the top of the pot look as neat as you can. You can put, if it suits your tree, you can put moss on it. A lot of people put moss on and you look at it and say, yeah, that was put on wood 25 minutes ago. It's that obvious. I've not seen too many people put moss on in the right in the bed and it doesn't show that that's what's been done. Not saying you can't do it, not saying it's not a benefit to do it. But don't think that you won't see it unless you're freaky, got a big lump of moss somewhere and you can carve it right around your tree, if that's what you're after. I think it's better to go little features of moss, then you don't have to match them up. Because when you get 2 bits of moss, they never look quite the same, and they always look like they've got a drawing. Whether you put moss on or not, if you're not putting moss on, whatever you finish on your soil could be neat. Make sure it's not running over the side, and when you drill it in, you haven't spilled somewhere or whatever. If you want to have rocks or features on them, fine, but they have to look like they were put there last night. Preferably, a little bit of growth on them that show that they've been there for a while. The pot itself, yes, you can do stuff about the pot. The pot should be clean. Oil it if you can, and that's nothing more than cleaning your pot down and giving a smear with olive oil or peanut oil or whatever. I would say it's 40. Or some people do don't do 40, but spraying that around don't get on the trees. Or some oil but give it a wipe to make sure it's all nice and clean and it's shown to its best. Cheap pots don't look too flat. If you've got the tree in the pot, yes, you wet and you nudge it around a little bit. Maybe you get judged at the front. Well, you can get away with it. What you do want to take care of is transporting your trees. I've seen plenty mangled getting to the show. Have them stable in your car. Don't just shove them all in there and say, I'll drive slow. Because someone will jump out in front of you, go bang, and take with you down the back. And then all the little rocks go through your boot. And I've seen trees damaged in the transit. So take care of them, pack them in nice so they don't move. I often carry them in something like that. That stops them tipping over. A bit, not so, but at least particularly small trees, they will roll over for sure.
You've got a camping mat or rubber mat.
I have a big rubber mat in my boot, which means that it doesn't slip.
Yeah.
I carry a whole steam train in there, and gravity is the only thing holding it in. But it's big and sticky, it's like a sticky rubber. So you don't want to slide around, but you don't want to go flashing around the corner on 2 wheels either, because they will go. Also take some tools with you when you go. Take some extra soil. So if it does go base over, you can put it back in the pot, tamp it all down and put some more solid and renew it. Take some tools if you suddenly realise that, you know, this leave's a bit big. Maybe trimming it is a bit better than being too crude and just ripping it off. And you just might have to do a little bit of maintenance on it. So take some tools with you. Also, your show's not over until that goes back on the bench again. You're going to be picking them up, you're going to be loading them up at 10 o'clock at night, unless you do it in the afternoon. You're going to be bringing them home at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night. I remember coming home one night when it was 11:30, it was raining. I'd open up the back of the van, I had a higher van, it rained, I pulled it back down, it got drenched with these trees, really had the shits at this stage, went racing inside because I had to get the van back, overhanging rosebush, grabbed them all as I went through because I couldn't see it in the dark, all on an 85's old pot, straight over. So they're not home until they're actually back on your bench. So make sure you take care of them because it's been 25 years fixing them up and don't want 25 years of better them. Okay, and obviously when you get in there you put it on the bench where your allocated position is unless you can steal some better position. If someone's, they haven't quite put them out where they should be, the little numbers that you get identified with. It looks a bit better up there. Because it does make a difference. I got one, a big tree was stuck down the back, in the corner, against a black vine, a black blind, and then the sun coming through. Disaster. It was never going to do anything in that position because it was such a crap position. If you can manage to put out the numbers correctly, don't touch anyone else's trees, by the way, because you get the shit if they start shooting. But I had a big eucalypt in just as you walk through the door, stand in front of you, big white background, superb. And the first thing you heard anyone comes through the door, they pick that tree. That was really just like the door. But if you can manage it, you know. And obviously put them the correct orientation. Don't put them backwards, sideways, the way they're not. Make sure the front's at the front. I've done that once. Look at the shoe. Consultation on which was the best way. He said, oh, this one. So they put it back that way and it just says, what have you got at the back and front? Don't listen to your opposition. Okay. That's probably all you can do at this stage. I'd encourage people to look at putting them in the show. It makes you try a bit harder. You know, if you're not going somewhere, anywhere will do sort of thing. But if you've got an aim, work to that aim, and an aim could be, or another show. Get your trees up to a point where you can say, I can put that in the show. I wouldn't be embarrassed by that being in the show. It may not go in as a winner. I had a year ever went in because they rang me up one time and said we haven't got any trees. Got me down the backyard and put all these trees in and scored a couple of them. But I now go work on the process of putting a tree in, and I think the public would like it because it's quite interesting. The public don't necessarily pick the trees that win as their trees that they like. It's quite bizarre. Also, just for lead, remember I had a pot, a fix that looked pretty much like that one down there. And she said, native in a Japanese pot in a native stand. Now we've got another stand, another pot, I should say. Another pot, so I listened to it. And I brought that one in only to show you that not all my pots are in brown Japanese pots. So yeah, if anyone wants to know how I did that, that's a concrete pot. Locked up in a couple of hour or so. We can have a session on them if anyone's interested. They're fairly durable, heavy, and they have to be chunky because they're concrete. But they're good to have them up around with, and you can do it at home. You don't have to kill them or anything like that. And to be honest, I had one before for the river, and the people at the show really used to like it. But eventually broke. Yeah. Well, that was just one of those. I'm not going to get obviously time to go on this thing, but I do listen to you, Lee. That's still green. That's only less than 2 weeks old. Okay. That's about all there is, I think, for trees and judging and stuff like that. So we're going to do appraise these things?
Go for it.
And what was it? What was the judgment? What was it? Perfect. Fun's lucky to get in because we're getting the weather changing now, and in probably 4 weeks this might be starting to look a bit bare. But I quite like that tree, that pot, and that stand. To me, they're all sort of in proportion. Got a nice little gin in there. The leaves are nice. I think it probably would have looked better a couple of weeks ago. Is this yours, Lee?
Simon?
Simon?
Yep.
Has that started to drop leaves?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like it. I think that is a nice combination. This is ties, isn't it?
Yeah.
I like swamp cypress. I think the fact that you got a big chunk of trunk there and not that much there is a bit of a problem.
I'll catch up.
Sorry?
It'll catch up.
In a word, no. It might. Well, let's hope it does. But that's a bit of a problem. You know, just a fundamental problem. But I like that. We tend to see these things grown up and out and whatever, and I've got one that looks a bit like that. It starts in a pot over there and ends over there somewhere. I think swamp cypress are actually good for doing non-traditional stuff. For swamp cypress, I like it. Pot maybe shade, well, maybe it could be a bit, but the pot and the stand I think go well together. With the swamp cypress, you can get away with that combination. I think it's good. I like it. Lee? Is this an accent plant or is this a tree?
That's a tree. Very small.
Wow. I like it. I'm into miniatures. I really like it. If again, usually showing it maybe on a stand, but yeah, I quite like it. That's my moss, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. I saw this on the thing. And
No, that was grown.
oh yeah. I saw it when I was coming in. I thought, oh, that's a nice little thing, and I still think it's a nice little thing. Again, I like the pot. I think that's complementary to the tree. If it was a show, a stand would be required. I like it. A gin if it's got to have a gin. This fella I like. I do like the stand. I think this is just a bit late in the season, is it? Yeah. Did this get burnt a bit?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. What can you do if you have a rock horrible weather? I like it. I like the shape of it. I like the stand. I like the two different types of moss. Quite quite like that. I'm going to get one right soon. People must be copying you, Lee. Again, I think that's a neat little tree. I just think there's something weird about pots with 3 legs. I don't know. It means it's indeterminate on where the front is, which is good because then you can turn it anywhere. But then the legs won't necessarily look right to me. I'm an engineer, mate. Things have got to be symmetrical. And I've got plenty of pots with 3 legs, but I hate them too. I don't hate it. I think they look weird too. I quite like the tree of them. This is Lee, for sure. And again, we've got a lovely tree, lovely shape. I think the pots talk to each other, but are we going to say something about the stand? I quite like it, but we had this business about us, Australian native with a stand.
That's not a Japanese stand.
Is it Australian?
That's a chocolate dish holder stand. The dish is now a cat dish.
I quite like it.
$8 a salvos.
I buy my stuff from Salvos too. They got some good food. Again, twin trunk. I like the old box, the end of an old box, complete with its old nails. Yep, nicely managed. Again, there's not full moss on it, and I reckon this wouldn't look good if it had full moss on the thing. That's I quite like that. Gosh, these leaves are tiny. Someone's been chipping away at this one. Again, I think that's pretty good. I admire people who can grow on a slab and keep it there, and particularly with nice edges like that. I think the rocks are nice. I'm not a great fan of gravel, but I think in this case it works. Your moss down the back here looks like it's all been sitting there for a heck of a long time rather than shoved on. Again, I think that's a lovely thing. This little fella, he's got a ways to go. He's only a youngster. And he'll look better for a few more years. But it's there, it's going. Yeah. I bought this because I wanted to show that I had some pots other than the brown pot. I had this in another pot. I'm looking after a tree for some blokes at in town in Elizabeth Bay or something, and I had it in a pot like that because I thought it looked really spiffy, and I looked at it and it looked really awful. So I swapped the pot. I bought this pot for them and put this in that pot, and took the pot that was there and put their tree in that pot. I quite like the pot. That came from the Fire and Earth show. Wasn't that good? She'd made it as a commission for somebody else, and they didn't want it. So that's where you want to go if you're looking for some nice handmade pots all in one spot.
Is that Helen who made that?
Neville was there when I bought it. Do you know who did it, Neville?
Neville's one, it's not here.
Neville's just walked outside.
Oh, I was wondering why I couldn't see it. Yeah, no, it's a known Sydney pot. The tree itself, well, it's interesting in that it's got a fissure in the middle because it used to be on a big bench and it had a big storm, and I come out a couple of days later and it was in the fish pond upside down, and it hit something and split the trunk. So I pulled the trunk back together as best I could, wired it up, and that's what we got now. But you know, I like a bit of action with the roots and all that sort of stuff.
It gives it a good story, Chris.
Sorry?
It gives it a good story, you know. You want a story for your tree, you know.
But you know, there's crossing roots and all sorts of things that it's not supposed to have, but it's actually come good in the last month or two because it was looking a bit sparse. And it seems to like this pot better than the other pot. But if it had a little bit more time to grow, I think I'd like a lot of foliage. Sorry, that's the way I've grown. And I reckon it could get a bit more. Maple, I have trouble with maples because I find they, particularly in Sydney, whether you get a really hot run and that's the end of your maples, and they don't necessarily come back that well. So I admire anyone who can grow a maple. These ones are looking towards the end of their run. We're getting into cooler weather, got a few burnt leaves and stuff on it. But I think it's a nice combination. I like the timber. It's in Brian's pot, so it's probably Brian's tree, correct? Brian?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine.
I quite like Brian's
They're very
pots and
young
trees.
and undeveloped, but
No, I think it's, again, growing like raft type stuff. I find that anyone who can do that, I reckon they're doing a good job. The pot here is the showstopper. I like it. I think there's been a lot of work done on the branches. Again, the moss is a bit of a late addition.
no, actually, that's probably been there for months.
Okay.
Yeah, I could have come off when I weeded it a bit. 'Cause
The strange thing with moss is it doesn't have roots. It grabs hold of things, and if they're not, whatever's holding it, if they're not called roots, I don't know what they are. But it doesn't have roots. And so, if you want to get it off the footpath, there's something holding it on, because they don't fall off, that's for sure. But it doesn't actually sink down any roots. And so what happens, if it gets dried out, it'll roll up, because it's got nothing to pull it down. And that's what, this one's a little bit. But I like the tree, I like figs, so how can I say it's not good? Okay, that's it.
Thank you. We've got about 40 minutes left. If you want to go workshop, mingle, look at any of the trees. If I can just ask everyone, please sign the attendance book before they head out, and also return these to make sure we're not losing more. Just look on the left-hand page and fill out anything that you might be, if you're missing a name tag, or any days you want to go to the Bonsai World. Otherwise, have a good evening and thanks for coming.
Just before you go, we have a little stand, and it is little, it's only this big, at the show, where our people sort of hang out and watch the trees and answer questions, stuff like that. We like to have a couple of trees on the stand, so if anyone has got something, not necessarily going to be a winner, but something interesting with a story, and they can't be too big because they've only got a little thing, you know, like that would be too big, but unless you put it right at the back. So if anyone's got any tree that they'd like to have, you know, on the cart, come and see me. I'd have to get to Croydon on sometime just before the show, and you get it back just after the show. But if there's something you'd like to you know, volunteer, something that takes the interest of the public. I got a little jacaranda, and that really gets them in, because people don't think of jacarandas as bonsai. And this is probably one of the very few that actually looks sort of like a bonsai. So anything like that, or anything with a bit of a story, when you pick it up and say, hey, this thing's 10 years old and it's only this big, and you know, whatever. Or this came from, or... So come and see me. I've also got a roster here, and I'll see these people to be at the show. If you want to come along, you can There's morning and afternoon session, and you don't have to be an expert on this. You'll know more than the people who you're going to be talking to, for sure, and you'll have other people there who say, oh, I'll ask you. So if anyone's interested in doing a shift out there, get you a ticket in. The only thing this year, I don't know what's going on, I've got to clear it. They want the names and the email address, I think, and the phone numbers of our volunteers, which they've never asked for. So I have to clear up that, so that may be something you may have to give. But we're not volunteers of the show, we are volunteers on our stand. We are not employees of the show. We're covered by our insurances, not the show's insurances. So I don't know what that's all about. There's never asked for it.
When will the trees actually be on show in the Easter show? So last year I went to
8th and 9th.
8th and 9th, only the 2 days?
Yep.
It's in the newsletter as well. There's like a flyer that you can find.
Yeah, you're lucky it's not. It used to be 8 days. We were there for 8 days. We had a stand with 25 trees on it.
Yeah.
We had a big show, but now it's only 2 days. So it used to be 4 days before. 2 days judging and then another 2 days. They're judging twice.
Because I went there last year and there was no display. And I missed out on the display.
Well, on 2 days.
I know.
So yeah, if you wanna come along, come and see me, and we'll get you signed up. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Chris.
Yes.
Got a nice trunk. Don't let these extend too much. You might be very wise to cut them back and let them shoot up, because they're shooting on the end of the branch and they'll just go longer and longer, and you want the tree to be contained. You want it close. And once you've got a lovely trunk, you've got good branch placement, too much up here, but get these clipped in. You can clip that in, just bring it in a little bit, and it's going to be a very nice tree. It's got your pot is dirty, shouldn't display a tree with a dirty pot, but it's got a lot of character, and it won't be too long. In a couple of years it'll be a very nice tree. I'd like to see this one in a lower pot. The pot's much too big for the tree, and yes, you could say you're using the tree to grow it on, the pot to grow it on, but you can still grow it on in a smaller pot, and that is too strong for the tree. Also, it's a Japanese pot, it's an Australian native. You've got dressy class to rusty class. It doesn't quite go, but if you're just working on the tree initially, it's okay. But again, I would start cutting this in, bring this branch down a little bit lower, bring this branch down a little bit lower. It's nice and healthy. This is a windswept that wanted to droop. It's a Kunzia, and I've just let it grow. I actually had to shorten it by about that much in order to get to the stand. Fort Jackson, this was a rejected fig that I bought in a plastic bag, and it's still got a way to go, but it's coming along very nicely. And it's a tree that has a double front, and it's difficult to pick out which one, but I've decided on that one. And that's my three-legged tombstone frog. Interesting tree. He's got foliage pads coming along. I'd like to see it planted a little bit more forward because the apex is a little bit too far back, but it's got a lot going for it. The pot isn't a bad pot. It's quite classy. I'd like to see a rougher pot in an Australian native, and that's a personal thing. But it's good balance. The stand on it is really nice, but the stand is also dressy, more sporty than the pot. The stand suits the tree. Pot could be a bit dressy, but it's a good size and a good shape. Now, this at the moment is not a bonsai, it's a tree in a pot. You should start wiring you've got a lovely trunk. You need to start wiring the branches down to get branches. A young tree has branches coming up. We're trying to make the trees look as old as possible and that the weight of the branch gradually brings it down. And if you look at some of the gum trees with the naked bark, you can see creases where it's actually creased the tree itself with the weight of the branch. So you need to bring these down. You've got an Australian native, you've got a dressy Japanese pot, you've got bricks. It doesn't go. The tree should be in a pot about that big by that big. It's much too big. And if you're displaying a tree, it has to tell a story. And what this is saying is somebody has put it all together, but not quite. Again, the tree is almost insignificant. And why? Because the pot is so big. If you want to get the tree to impress, even at this stage, you have to get the pot in a relationship to the tree. Beautiful pot, absolutely gorgeous pot, lovely, almost a purpley color. The tree, these can be brought down a little bit more at the top, but it's a beautiful tree. It's a little ruby fig, which is really slow grower, so to have a trunk like that, it's good. I'd like to see it potted about here. The apex should be over the center of the pot, and that should be the center of the pot. So it looks as though it's trying to escape from the pot. So your planting angle or position is really important to bring out the best in your tree. This is a very clever arrangement, but you're losing the tree in the pot. The pot, that you need a tree with more gravitas, more gusto. It's a gorgeous little tree, but it needs something that will actually show it off instead of dominating it. And also you've got a whole cluster of branches. I know it's a mini, but you should still wire and shape the tree. It's just easy to do it this way, but if you start bringing these down, you're going to get a whole new story in the tree. Again with this one, stunning pot, slab of stone, weighs a ton, but you can barely see the tree. You must balance the pot with the tree. It doesn't matter how beautiful the pot is, if your attention is taken to the pot, you've done it incorrectly. Your attention should first go on the whole thing, then on the tree, and then on the pot and the stand. But this one, you just look at that magnificent rock, and it's hard. Number one, the tree hasn't been wired very much, so it needs to be wired and shaped. Brilliantly healthy, beautiful. Good tree, nice foliage coming on. It's a commercial pot, and it's an Aussie stand. The pot is dressy, the stand is really casual. They're saying two completely different things. It's like going to a ball with a ball gown and boots on. You have to dress everything when you're displaying. That with an Australian native on it would be stunning. Okay? But the tree itself, you can look straight into the tree. There's a little bit of secrecy here where you have to look around that. But you've got so much character going, great shape. Figs have rounded tops. This hits all the markers. It just needs an Aussie pot. I would like to see this planted a little bit forward. It seems to be leaning back. Just next repot, just bring it forward lightly, because your trees, the apex of the tree should be slightly toward the viewer. I think the pot is a little bit too big for the tree, although it's a gorgeous pot and a nice stand. The stones tend to dominate. Now they're great if you want to build muscles and lift it, but the stones are taking too much eyesight away from the tree. Again, you're spending all your time and effort in styling the tree, but you've got the stones. I would put it in a smaller pot. I would take away the stones, and I would do something more subtle, particularly if you get some of the mountain rock that's got crevices and this sort of thing to create some interest. I'll lift this up. It's a tiny tree, but the lovely trunk is hidden. Now, if you're going to have this as a front branch, you need to bring it over so you can see the trunk. The trunk is the most important part of the tree, and it's being hidden by this. You need some wiring to shape it, and you're getting two apexes. So you need to thin out the top. To me, and this is my taste, okay, there's nothing wrong with this pot. It's a gorgeous glaze. I think it's a little bit too small for the tree, but I tend to pot a little bit bigger. This is another one where it's a lovely tree, but the pot is dominating it. It needs a pot not so deep to bring the tree up a little bit more, because the tree is sunken about that much in the pot. So the tree's got a tremendous amount of potential, but you've got 3 schools of thought on aerial roots. Number 1, get rid of them. Number 2, leave them all. Number 3, leave the important ones. Now I've seen one big fig that had a shaw of roots across the back, and it was absolutely brilliant, but there were only a couple of roots on the front. These roots are crossing over the trunk. If you look at if you look at a tree that has something crossing, you may not be fully aware of it, but it breaks your eye. So I've just removed a low crossing root on a Nabari, and it's changed the tree. One tiny root. So I would be taking some of these roots, some of these area roots out, because you've got an incredible story here that's being hidden. So repot it, lift it up, a more shallow pot, and give it a chance to shine the way it should.
Excuse me, Lee, can I ask you a question? You say the tree is sunken. What happens if you lift the tree up? Does it make any difference?
Yeah, visually it will, because all of a sudden you're giving the tree dominance. What's happening is the tree is planted like this. If you bring it like this, you suddenly can see the tree. Now, if you've got a crap tree, good, you want to hide it. But this isn't. This has got a lot of character going for it, but you can't see it. Cute display, but you're not doing justice to any of the things. Number 1, whoever owns this, it's a gorgeous pot. Get rid of the ground cover, because it's starweed. It will make a solid mat across your tree. The water won't get through. If you drop it on the ground, you have it all through your grass. It's a dreadful weed. Makes a beautiful ground cover. Get rid of it. They really should be a little bit separate. That pot is a little bit too big for the tree. It's dominating. The tree should be in a tiny pot about that big. But it's cute. But once again, just because you have a little tree, you should still get the branches down. You don't want them coming up like that, because it looks like a young tree and it looks as though you haven't styled it. This one has lots of possibilities, but let's get a little bit more styling going up here. And I would, because of the tree, I'd like to see it in a slightly more oval pot, and again, not quite so deep. And that's another thing. I keep saying not quite so deep, but you've got to consider your climatic conditions and how long you're away from home. If some of these people can overpot because they're away for 8 hours, 10 hours, and the tree can suffer, particularly in our heat. So that is something that you have to judge. So when I say a lower pot, I'm talking about ideal conditions. And the other thing too, that you can have it in a deeper pot, and when you go to show it, you can put it in a shallower pot.
Does that mean disturbing the root? If you're going to put it in a shallow pot,
But if you're working with the tree and you're planning on doing that, you would have had root pruning, so it wouldn't be disturbing. And if it's a tree like a trident maple or a Japanese maple, you wouldn't do it anyway, because the tree is touchy.
Yeah.
But you know your trees, and you know you can get away with it with a native. You can get away with it with figs, etc. Privets, that sort of thing. But not some of the. This is a sandpaper fig. It's got great potential. Keep in mind that your branching should be in proportion to the trunk. The branching is getting too far out. When the tree gets bigger, then you can extend a bit. Also, I would feel that you're trying to get an apex up here, because you wouldn't normally have a tree spread like this. It's going to have one direction or another, and this tree at this stage doesn't have an apex. And I would be cutting it back to bring it in. It's a sandpaper fig. It grows in understory. It's a native to the Sydney area, and it's in a Japanese pot. It's a beautiful pot, but it's Japanese, and it ain't a Japanese tree. So when you're potting, think where your tree grows. This is a cute little broom style. It's an absolutely gorgeous pot. Beautiful, beautiful pot. I would again say a lower pot, but again, because of the amount of foliage this has and because of our summer heat, this is probably a very good depth for the tree. And this one is Green Island Fig. It's really young. It needs to be styled. Start bringing your branches down. Start getting some shape. If you can get any bend in the trunk, try to do it, but the trunk might be too set. Anyway, you can take me out and shoot me now.